I'm here now with Muddassar Malik from BMA Capital in Karachi, so one of our emerging market delegates. Muddassar, what brings you so far to come to this, which is obviously a majorly a European conference? What's interesting you about the event, and why are you here?
Well, I think this conference holds a lot of fascination for people all over the world, and I think particularly now with all the risk and uncertainties surrounding Europe, and Europe being such a huge global issue, really people from all over the world are focusing on what happens and how things and how policymakers take decisions moving forward. I think coming from Pakistan, obviously Europe is a very strong trading partner, and that is one of the reasons why we are here to try and understand how the European crisis might impact on investment and flows in Pakistan.
I know you have many clients in Pakistan. You're one of the largest asset managers in the country, if not the largest asset manager in the country. Do your local clients ask you about Europe? Do they feel what's happening in the Eurozone is relevant and important to the performance of the assets you hold for them?
Our business is principally domestic focused, but nonetheless, I think with the degree of interdependence that financial markets have today, really asset prices in Pakistan and in Asia you've seen moving in tandem with what's happening in Europe, or in response to what's happening in Europe. Having said that, most of our clients who are pension funds in the domestic market who hold bonds and stocks, they've had a very good run. Pakistan is an exception, I should say, this year, because the market is up about 13% against, that's the MSCI Pakistan index, as against, say, MSCI Europe, which is negative 7%, and MSCI Emerging Markets, which is negative 3%.
But there is still a small element of political and other risk in Pakistan. It seems to be edging forward slowly to an improving situation. How do you read what's going on in the country politically and economically?
Well, I think investors, when they focus on Pakistan, whether they are domestic investors or international investors, they have a high degree of risk aversion. I think Pakistan as a country enjoys many of the opportunities and challenges that you find in other emerging markets, and particularly in Asia, which are a large population, a large domestic market, and a growing domestic market. But Pakistan has one difference, which is that I think 5% of the worst news is projected 95% of the time. And so, if you like, the bubble of pessimism has been growing larger and larger, and that in itself is a big opportunity, I think.
Have international capital flows to Pakistan continued to fall, or are they beginning to pick up, or are you seeing a different alignment of the way capital is flowing, less perhaps from the West, more from China and other places in Asia?
That's a very interesting question, and I think we have seen obviously on the portfolio side, on a year-to-date basis, there have been net negative capital flows, although they're small, but they're nonetheless in the negative territory. If you look at USAID and DFID, which are the two largest aid agencies around the world, they have made Pakistan their single biggest priority, or one of their largest programs. For example, DFID's Pakistan program is the largest in its portfolio. So there is a sense that the international community feels that Pakistan is a country that cannot be ignored, and that governance and some of the other infrastructure issues and social indicators need to be brought up in order to help Pakistan get to the next level. I think that we also see that the domestic business community, which is a huge stakeholder, has continued to invest, and so there is a sense that despite all the problems which we have now, perhaps are problems that we had 5 years ago, and so you have to get on with business.
And what about the security situation? Of course, unfortunately, this is what we see on our TV screens and our terminals here in the West. Is it improving? Is no news good news?
Well, interestingly, I was reading an article that was written by Goldman Sachs, and I was not aware of this, but they were talking about the insecurity in Pakistan, and rather the lack of security. And funnily enough, again, this is talking about the fact that the worst 5% of the news is projected 95% of the time. This Goldman Sachs article was talking about the fact that the homicide rate in Mexico is probably higher than in Pakistan, and perhaps at par with Indonesia and some of the other Asian economies. Having said that, of course, the security concerns are not unwarranted. And so I think it's important that when you look at investment flows and when you look at the confidence indicators, you have to understand that by and large, investors are perturbed about that, and therefore the focus of government policy and I think the international community has to be on what are the things that need to happen that change this perception.
Excellent. Muddassar, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much. I hope that was
great.
okay. Good
Awesome.